The solicitor's office smelled of old paper and dying roses. Isolde Grey sat in the leather chair, her gloved hands folded in her lap, and tried not to think about the eviction notice tucked inside her reticule. 3 days. That was all the time she had left before her mother's illness would force them onto the streets. The creditors had been patient, more patient than she deserved, but patience, like charity, eventually withered. "Miss Grey, if you would simply sign here," the solicitor said, sliding a heavy parchment across the desk. His fingers were long and bloodless. "The estate requires only your consent." Isolde barely glanced at the document. The words swam before her tired eyes, whereas "and henceforth and in perpetuity," legal language meant to obscure, not illuminate. But the number at the bottom was clear enough. £20,000. Enough to save her mother. Enough to keep them alive. "What are the terms?" she asked, though her voice held no real curiosity. Desperation had a way of making terms irrelevant. "Standard marriage contract," the solicitor said smoothly. "The Lord Valerian requires a wife. You require financial security. It is mutually beneficial." Marriage. The word should have given her pause, should have made her ask questions, demand details, insist on meeting this Lord Valerian before binding herself to him, but her mother's rasping cough echoed in her memory, and Isolde's hand was already reaching for the pen. She signed her name in careful script. Isolde Catherine Grey. The solicitor blotted the ink with practiced efficiency. "Excellent. The ceremony will take place tonight." "Tonight?" Isolde's head snapped up. "But I haven't even—" "The terms were quite clear, Miss Grey." His smile was thin and cold. "Though I understand you chose not to read them." A chill crawled down her spine, but it was too late. The contract bore her signature. The solicitor was already standing, already gesturing toward the door where a black carriage waited in the fog-choked street. The ceremony took place in a chapel so old its stones seemed to exhale darkness. Isolde stood at the altar in a dress that wasn't hers, white silk, that felt like a shroud, and stared at the man who was about to become her husband. Lord Valerian. She had expected someone elderly, perhaps infirm, someone who needed a wife for companionship or appearances. She had not expected this. He was tall, impossibly so, with hair like raven's wings and skin so pale it seemed to drink the candlelight rather than reflect it. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, ancient and weary, and when they settled on her face, Isolde felt the weight of centuries pressing against her chest. "You came," he said, and his voice was soft as velvet, cold as winter. "I signed," she whispered. "I didn't realize that you were signing your life away." A ghost of something amusement, sorrow, flickered across his features. "Few do." The priest began the ceremony. His words were in Latin, the old rites, and Isolde understood none of it. But when Valerian took her hand, she understood the coldness of his touch, understood the absolute stillness of his chest. No breath, no heartbeat. "What have I done?" The ring slid onto her finger, a band of silver, set with a black stone that pulsed like a captured heartbeat. The moment it touched her skin, something shifted in the air. A bond. A chain. She felt it lock into place, invisible but absolute. "You may kiss your bride," the priest said, but his voice sounded wrong. Hollow. Valerian did not kiss her. He simply stared down at her with those terrible ancient eyes. "I am sorry," he said quietly, "but the law required a bride and you signed of your own will." "What law?" Isolde's voice cracked. "What are you?" "The contract bound you in marriage," he continued as if she hadn't spoken, "but the ring binds you in blood. You are mine now, Isolde Grey. Mine by covenant law. Mine for eternity." The chapel began to spin. Isolde tried to pull her hand away, but his grip gentle, cold held firm. "The coven decreed that I must take a mortal bride or face execution," Valerian said, each word careful and controlled. "I delayed as long as I could, but their patience, like all things mortal and immortal, has limits." "Coven?" Isolde whispered. "You're a vampire." He released her hand, stepped back. And now, legally and magically, you are my wife. My consort. Bound to me until death, though death, I'm afraid, may be a very long time coming. Isolda's knees gave out. She would have fallen if Valerian hadn't caught her, his arms like iron vans, his touch so cold it burned. I didn't know, she gasped. The contract I didn't read, no one ever does. His voice held centuries of resignation. But ignorance does not void a covenant, Mrs. Valerian. The bond is sealed. Your blood calls to mine now. There is no breaking it. He carried her from the chapel as if she weighed nothing. The carriage waited, black as a hearse, and as Valerian settled her inside, Isolde caught a glimpse of his face in the moonlight. Beautiful and damned. A fallen angel carved from marble and regret. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would not comfort her. "Home," Valerian said simply. "To the estate, to the life you purchased with your signature." The carriage lurched forward into the darkness. Isolde pressed her hand against the window, watching the world she knew disappear into fog and shadow. The ring on her finger pulsed with warmth that didn't belong to her. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Or perhaps it was something worse. She had signed a contract without reading it. She had married a monster. And now, bound by blood and law and her own desperate foolishness, there was no escape. The estate rose from the moors like a monument to forgotten gods. Isolde stepped from the carriage and tilted her head back, trying to see where the towers ended and the night sky began. Impossible to tell. The manor was built of black stone, its windows narrow as arrow slits, its architecture more fortress than home. Thorned roses climbed the walls in skeletal profusion, their blooms the color of old blood. "Welcome to Thornfield Hall," Valerian said, offering his hand to steady her descent. She didn't take it. Her own hand still burned where the ring sat, a constant reminder of the bond she'd forged in ignorance. Is that supposed to be comforting? No? He withdrew his hand without offense, merely informative. The front doors opened before they reached them, swinging inward on silent hinges. No servant appeared to greet them. The entrance hall was vast and empty, lit by candles that seemed to burn without melting, their flames too steady to be natural. Isolde's footsteps echoed on marble floors. Every surface gleamed with cold perfection. No dust, no wear, as if time itself hesitated to touch this place. Portraits lined the walls, stern-faced men and women in centuries-old dress, their eyes following her with painted disapproval. "Your family?" she asked, desperate for any conversation that might feel normal. "The previous lords and ladies of Thornfield." Valerian moved past the portraits without glancing at them. "All dead now. I am the last." "How long have you?" she caught herself. "How long have you been? A vampire?" He said the word without flinching. 347 years. I was turned during the reign of Charles II, a political maneuver gone wrong. His voice held no emotion, as if he were recounting someone else's history. "The woman I loved became the creature I feared. She gave me eternity as a wedding gift." Isolde stopped walking. "You were married before?" "Once." He turned to face her, and in the candlelight, his features seemed carved from grief. "She is ash now, destroyed by hunters 2 centuries ago. The Coven law states that a vampire lord cannot exist without a consort for power, for legitimacy, for balance. I have evaded that law for 200 years, but their patience has ended. So you bought a bride." Bitterness crept into her voice. "How much did I cost? £20,000 seems generous for a prisoner." Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or recognition. "You are not a prisoner, Isolde. You are free to go anywhere on the estate. The library, the gardens, the eastern wing. You may do as you please. Except leave?" "Except leave." He inclined his head. "The bond prevents it. If you stray beyond the estate boundaries, the ring will summon you back. And if you remove the ring..." He trailed off, letting the implication hang. "I'll die," Isolde finished. "Eventually." Valerian's jaw tightened. "The bond is specific. Your life is now tied to mine. My blood sustains the magic that sustains you. Without the ring, that connection severs, and mortal bodies do not fare well when severed from vampire covenanters. Isolde looked down at the ring. At the black stone pulsing with stolen warmth, she wanted to tear it off, hurl it into the darkness, scream at the injustice of being trapped by her own desperation. But she was her mother's daughter, practical, enduring. Screaming would change nothing. "Show me my room," she said instead. Valerian led her up a grand staircase to the second floor, down a corridor lined with more portraits and locked doors. He stopped at the end of the hall, before a set of double doors carved with roses and thorns. "Your chambers," he said, pushing them open. The room beyond was beautiful in a mournful way. A four-poster bed dominated the space, draped in silver and black silk. Bookshelves lined one wall. A fireplace crackled with flames that cast dancing shadows across Persian rugs. French doors opened onto a balcony overlooking gardens drowned in moonlight. "It's lovely," Isolde admitted, hating how her voice softened. "It belonged to my first wife," Valerian said quietly. "I have kept it unchanged. Perhaps that was sentimental foolishness." Isolde turned to face him. He stood in the doorway, careful not to cross the threshold, as if her chambers were sacred ground he dared not violate. The candlelight caught the sharp angles of his face, the inhuman perfection of his features. Beautiful and terrible and utterly alone. "Why did you wait so long?" she asked. 200 years. Why not find another bride sooner?" His expression shuddered. "Because I remembered what it cost the first time. Because every bride I take is another mortal life I condemn to this existence. Or worse, to death when I inevitably fail to protect her. Then why now?" "Because the coven gave me no choice." His hands clenched at his sides. "Wed a mortal bride within the month, or face execution by sunlight. I chose survival. And I chose someone desperate enough not to ask questions." The honesty stung more than deception would have. Isolde wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the fire. "My mother is dying. I needed the money for her care." "I know." Valerian's voice gentled. "The funds have already been transferred to her physician. She will want for nothing." Relief and resentment warred in Isolde's chest. He had saved her mother. He had also enslaved her. Both truths existed, sharp and irreconcilable. "Will I become like you?" she whispered. "Not unless you choose it." He met her eyes steadily. "The bond does not transform. It merely connects. You will age slower while wearing the ring, heal faster, live longer, but you will remain mortal unless I turn you, and I have no intention of doing so without your explicit consent." How gracious. A muscle twitched in his jaw. "I did not want this either, Isolde. But we are bound now, you and I. The covenant cannot be undone. We must find a way to coexist." "As what? Husband and wife?" She laughed, and it sounded broken even to her own ears. "You don't even want me here. Want has nothing to do with it." Valerian turned to leave, then paused. "There is only one rule in this house, Isolde. Stay away from the West Wing. The doors are locked for a reason. What's in the West Wing?" His eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw something ancient and hungry stir in their depths. "Things that should remain buried," he said. "Good night, Mrs. Valerian." He closed the doors, leaving her alone in a dead woman's room. Isolde sank onto the bed and finally allowed herself to weep. 3 weeks passed, like ghosts, through Thornfield Hall. Isolde established a routine, because routine was the only defense against madness. She woke at dawn alone, always alone, and breakfasted in her chambers. She spent mornings in the library, losing herself in books that smelled of centuries. Afternoons belonged to the gardens, where she walked among roses that bloomed impossibly large and dark. She never saw Valerian during daylight hours. He appeared only after sunset, a shadow moving through the manor's corridors with inhuman grace. Sometimes she glimpsed him in the gallery, standing before portraits of the dead. Sometimes she heard his footsteps in the hall outside her room, pausing, then moving on. He never knocked, never entered. They took dinner together, her eating, him watching with those ancient, weary eyes. The meals were silent affairs, punctuated only by the clink of silver on china. He asked no questions. She offered no conversation. They were strangers bound by contract and magic, performing the pantomime of marriage without any of its substance. Isolde told herself this was preferable, told herself his distance was mercy, not cruelty. She told herself many lies in those 3 weeks. On the 22nd night, the dreams began. Isolde woke gasping, her nightgown drenched in sweat, the taste of copper on her tongue. The dream had been vivid, visceral. She'd been running through a forest, pursued by something with red eyes and ancient hunger. And then Valerian had been there, standing between her and the darkness, his fangs bared, his voice a command that made the shadows retreat. "Mine," he had said in the dream. "She is mine." Isolde pressed her hands to her face, trying to steady her breathing. Just a dream, nothing more. But her heart raced as if she'd truly been running. And when she looked down at her ring, the black stone pulsed with unusual intensity. A knock at her door made her jump. "Isolde?" Valerian's voice, muffled by wood and propriety. "Are you well?" She should have told him to go away. Should have maintained the careful distance they'd cultivated. Instead, she found herself crossing the room, opening the door. He stood in the corridor, still dressed in the black coat and cravat he'd worn to dinner hours ago. His hair was disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. Distress marked his features subtle, but there. "I felt." He stopped, jaw clenching. "The bond, your fear. It woke me. You sleep?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Sometimes." His eyes searched her face. "What happened?" "A nightmare, nothing more." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware that she wore only a thin nightgown. "I'm fine." Valerian didn't move, but his gaze intensified. "You're lying. I can hear your heartbeat. It's still racing. That's intrusive. That's the bond." He stepped back, creating distance. "I apologize. I should not have come. But when I felt your terror..." He cut himself off, shaking his head. "You are safe here, Isolde. Whatever you dreamed, it cannot harm you." "It felt real," she admitted, unsure why she was telling him this. "There was something hunting me, and you protected me." Something shifted in his expression. The bond sometimes creates resonance, shared dreams, echoes of emotion. He turned away. One hand braced against the wall as if needing support. "I did not anticipate this happening so soon." "What does it mean?" "It means the covenant is strengthening." His voice was carefully neutral. "Your blood is learning mine. The connection deepens. Can we stop it?" "No." He looked back at her, and the sorrow in his eyes was older than empires. The bond was designed to create unity between vampire and consort, to make the mortal strong enough to survive in our world. It will continue to strengthen until... He stopped. "Until what?" "Until we complete the bond." Valerian's hands fisted at his sides. "With blood, with intimacy, with willing acceptance of what you are to me." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Isolde's throat went dry. "I didn't agree to that. I know." He straightened, all emotion bleeding from his face. "Which is why I have maintained distance. Why I will continue to maintain distance. You are my wife-in-law only, Isolde. I will not take what you do not freely offer." "Then what happens if we don't?" "Complete it?" "The bond remains incomplete, functional but fractured." He met her eyes steadily. "You will continue to experience dreams, phantom sensations. The ring will anchor you, but the connection will always feel hollow. And if we do complete it," his jaw tightened, "then you would be truly bound, part of my world in ways that cannot be undone. You would share my strength, my longevity, my curse, everything." Isolde stepped back, shaking her head. "I can't. I didn't ask for any of this." "I know." Valerian's voice was infinitely gentle. "Which is why I will never ask it of you. Good night, Isolde." He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the darkness of the corridor. Isolde closed the door and leaned against it, her heart still pounding. The ring on her finger pulsed in rhythm with something she couldn't name, wasn't ready to name. The next morning, she found a book on her breakfast tray. Old leather binding, pages yellow with age. A note in elegant script rested on top. "These are the histories of the Coven. Read them if you wish to understand what you've become part of, or burn them if you prefer ignorance. The choice, as always, is yours." Evie Isolde picked up the book with trembling hands. She chose to read. The histories were written in languages that should have been incomprehensible Latin, ancient Greek, something older that looked like runes. Yet when Isolde's eyes moved across the pages, the words resolved into meaning, as if the ring itself translated the text directly into her mind. "The blood bond allows comprehension," a marginal note explained. "Consort and vampire share knowledge as they share life." She learned that the Coven was not a single entity, but a collection of vampire courts scattered across Europe, each governed by ancient laws designed to maintain order among immortals. She learned that a vampire lord without a consort was considered unstable, dangerous, a threat to the careful balance between the mortal and immortal worlds. She learned that Valerian had been exceptional in his defiance, holding out for 2 centuries when most vampires remarried within decades. And she learned what completion of the bond truly meant. The first blood is sacred, one passage read. When consort and vampire share blood willingly, a transformation begins. Not the transformation of turning that requires death and rebirth, but a metamorphosis of connection. The consort becomes daywalker, neither fully mortal nor fully immortal. Stronger, faster, marked by eternity without being consumed by it. Until the consort chooses to turn or chooses to break the bond through death. Isolde set the book down, her hands shaking. The implications were staggering. If she completed the bond, she would become something other. Still herself, but enhanced, changed, trapped. Or was she already trapped? The ring would not come off. The estate was her prison, gilded though it was. What difference would completion make except to bind her more thoroughly to a man, a creature who barely spoke to her? "You're reading them?" She startled, nearly dropping the book. Valerian stood in the library doorway, a wraith in black, his pale skin luminous in the afternoon light filtering through heavy curtains. "You're awake," she said stupidly. "It's daytime. The curtains are thick enough." He moved into the room, careful to avoid the slivers of sunlight. "And I wanted to see if you'd chosen to read or burn." Knowledge seemed preferable to ignorance. She closed the book. "Though I'm not certain I'm grateful for it." Valerian settled into a chair across from her, movements precise and controlled. "You have questions?" "Hundreds." Isolde met his gaze. "But I'll start with this. Why me? If you needed a bride, surely there were others. Willing women. Women who wouldn't have signed out of desperation. Because desperation was necessary." His voice was quiet. "A woman who signed willingly, with full knowledge of what I am, would have signed for the wrong reasons. Power, immortality, fascination with darkness." He gestured toward the book. "The bond feeds on truth, Isolde, on genuine emotion. A marriage begun in calculation would corrupt the magic. So you wanted someone naive. I wanted someone who signed for love." His eyes held hers. "Your mother. You signed that contract to save her. Love, even filial love, is the foundation the bond requires." Isolde's throat tightened. "That's manipulative." "Yes," he didn't deny it. "I am 300 years old, Isolde. I have learned manipulation as humans learn to breathe. But I swear to you, I have not manipulated your feelings. Will not. Whatever exists between us must be genuine, or the bond will fail." "What happens if it fails?" "We both die." He said it matter-of-factly. "The covenant, once established, cannot be dissolved, only completed or destroyed. If we remain in this liminal state too long connected but not bonded, the magic will consume us both." Horror pooled in Isolde's stomach. You didn't tell me that. Would you have believed me? Valerian leaned forward. Would knowing have changed anything? You needed the money. I needed a bride. We both signed for survival. How long? Her voice cracked. How long do we have? Months. Perhaps a year. He stood, began pacing. The bond strengthens naturally over time. The shared dreams are a sign. Soon you'll begin feeling my emotions, hunger, anger, desire, and I'll feel yours more intensely. Eventually, the incomplete bond will become painful, then fatal. Isolde pressed her hands to her face. This is insane. This is immortal law. He stopped pacing, stood before her. I am sorry, Isolde, truly. But we must find a way to coexist, to build something real from this manufactured beginning. How? She looked up at him, this beautiful monster who held her life in his cold hands. You barely speak to me. You avoid me during the day. We're strangers. Then let us stop being strangers. Valerian extended his hand. Come. There's something I want to show you. She stared at his offered hand. Pale, perfect, deadly. She took it. He led her through the manor, past the locked doors and portrait-lined halls, to a part of the house she'd never explored. They descended a staircase into what appeared to be a wine cellar, but instead of bottles, the walls held paintings. Hundreds of them. Isolde moved through the space, stunned. Portraits, landscapes, studies of hands and eyes and mouths, all executed with extraordinary skill, the kind that came from centuries of practice. You painted these, she breathed. It passes the time. Valerian stood in the doorway, not entering. The nights are long when you're immortal. One must find ways to fill them. She stopped before a portrait of a woman dark-haired, laughing, full of life. Your first wife, Eleanor. His voice softened with old grief. She was everything good, everything human. I loved her beyond reason. And she became a vampire. She chose it. He finally entered the room, moved to stand beside Isolde. I warned her, begged her not to, but she was. Fearless, she wanted forever with me. His jaw clenched. She got 23 years before the hunters found us. Isolde looked at the painted smile, the captured joy. I'm sorry. I am too. Valerian turned away from the portrait. I swore I would never love again, never risk another mortal in my world. And yet here you are. You don't love me, Isolde said. No. He met her eyes. But the bond is designed to create love, to manufacture what should exist naturally, and that terrifies me more than sunlight. In the silence that followed, Isolde felt that pulse of warmth from the ring, echoed by a coldness that wasn't her own. His fear, his sorrow, leaking through the incomplete bond, like water through cracks. I felt that, she whispered. I know. Valerian's expression was bleak. Its beginning. The shared sensations grew stronger over the following days. Isolde would be reading in the library and suddenly feel a sharp pang of hunger. Not for food, but for something darker, more primal. She'd be walking in the gardens and feel waves of melancholy so deep it drove her to her knees. At night she woke tasting blood that wasn't there. Her body burning with thirst she couldn't name. Valerian's emotions, his hunger, his curse, bleeding into her. She found him in the portrait gallery one evening, standing before a painting of a sunset he could never see except in memory. He didn't turn when she approached, but his shoulders tensed. I can feel you, he said quietly. Your confusion, your fear. It's loud. Then you know how it feels, Isolde snapped, exhaustion making her sharp. I woke up this morning tasting blood, Valerian. Blood. I didn't drink, wanting things I shouldn't want. I know. He finally faced her, and she saw shadows beneath his eyes that shouldn't exist on undead flesh. I feel your dreams, your longing for sunlight, your grief for the life you've lost. Then you understand why this is unbearable. Yes. He moved toward her, stopped an arm's length away. Which is why I think we should complete the bond. Isolde's breath caught. What? Not the full bond. Valerian raised his hands, palms out, a gesture of peace. Not yet, but the first blood. Enough to stabilize the connection, stop the bleeding of emotions. We're drowning in each other, Isolde. If we establish proper boundaries through the ritual, we might actually be able to coexist. The book said the first blood changes the consort. It does. He didn't lie to her. You'll become stronger, heal faster, gain some resistance to vampire compulsion, but you'll remain mortal. Remain you. Isolde wrapped her arms around herself. And what do you get? Stability. His voice was raw. An anchor. The ability to walk through my own home without feeling your heartbeat like thunder in my skull. The bond is designed to be completed, Isolde. Resisting it is destroying us both. She wanted to refuse. Wanted to cling to her humanity, her autonomy, her right to reject this magical chains. But exhaustion wore at her resolve. She was so tired of feeling his hunger, so tired of waking in the night, convinced she was dying of thirst for blood. How is it done? She asked. Valerian's expression flickered with relief and resignation. A mutual exchange. You drink from me. I drink from you. Blood for blood. It must be willing, must be offered freely. Will it hurt? No. He stepped closer. I would never hurt you, Isolde. This is sacred. The Coven law is absolute on this point. Harm done during the first blood nullifies the bond. She looked up at him, this ancient creature whose emotions had become tangled with her own, beautiful and terrible and so utterly alone. Had been alone for 200 years, bound by laws she didn't understand, forced into a marriage he didn't want. Just as she was. All right, she whispered. Tell me what to do. He prepared the ritual with care. Candles arranged in a circle in her chambers, silver bowls filled with herbs that smelled of earth and moonlight. He moved through the preparations with quiet reverence, as if this were a sacrament, which she supposed it was. You can still refuse, Valerian said as he lit the final candle. Even now, the choice is always yours. But Isolde was tired of being torn apart by someone else's hunger. Tired of feeling grief that wasn't hers. She needed boundaries, needed separation between her soul and his, even if it meant binding them more thoroughly in the process. I'm ready, she said. Valerian knelt before her, his movements fluid and formal. Then we begin. He took her left hand, the one that bore the ring. With his other hand he produced a small silver blade, ornate, ancient, sacred. I will cut my palm first. You will drink. Just a taste, nothing more. And then? Then I cut yours, and I drink. His gray eyes met hers, solemn and ancient. Are you certain, Isolde? No. She managed a shaky smile. But I'm choosing it anyway. Isn't that what matters? It's everything. He drew the blade across his palm. Blood welled, impossibly dark, more black than red. He raised his hand to her lips. Drink. Isolde hesitated. This was the moment. The point of no return. Once she tasted his blood, the bond would shift, deepen, transform into something permanent. She thought of her mother, safe and cared for because of this bargain, thought of the past weeks drowning in Valerian's emotions, thought of the alternative mutual destruction, the slow consumption of incomplete magic. She pressed her lips to his palm and drank. The blood was cold and tasted of iron in midnight. It burned down her throat, ignited something in her chest power, ancient and terrible and overwhelming. She gasped, pulling back, and felt the world shift. Everything became sharper, the candlelight brighter, the scent of herbs almost overwhelming. She could hear Valerian's heartbeat. No, not a heartbeat. Something else. Something that moved his undead blood through eternal veins. Isolde. His voice was gentle. Your hand. She offered it without thinking. Watched, distant and dreaming. As he drew the blade across her palm, her blood welled, bright mortal red, and when Valerian raised her hand to his mouth, something in his expression cracked. Forgive me, he whispered. Then his lips closed over the wound. Isolde's vision whited out. She felt his hunger had been feeling it for weeks, but this was different. This was immediate, overwhelming, her blood in his mouth, her life on his tongue, and beneath it all, something deeper. Older. A recognition that had nothing to do with law or covenant, mine. Something whispered in the space between their souls. Mine. Finally. Mine. When Valerian pulled away, his eyes had gone full black, his fangs extended. He looked monstrous. Beautiful. Damned, it's done, he said, voice rough. The bond is sealed. Isolde touched her palm. The wound had already closed, leaving only a thin silver scar. I feel different, she whispered. You are different. Valerian stood, putting distance between them. And so am I. He left her chambers without another word, but Isolde could still feel him, distant now, separate but present, a cold star in the back of her mind that would never fully set. The first blood was complete. And everything had changed. Isolde woke at dusk. Not dawn dusk. The shift was subtle but undeniable. Her body, which had always risen with the sun, now stirred as darkness fell. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and felt Valerian wake 2 floors below, felt his consciousness unfold like night-blooming flowers. "Good evening," a voice said in her mind. Not words exactly, but impression. She sat bolt upright. "Can you hear my thoughts?" No, Valerian's mental voice was calmer than his spoken one. Only impressions. Emotions. The bond is not telepathy, merely awareness. This is invasive. Yes. A pause filled with something like regret. I'm sorry. It will settle. Become background noise. For now, everything is new. Heightened. Isolde pressed her hands to her face. Her skin felt different, smoother, cooler. When she looked in the mirror, her reflection showed the same face, but sharper somehow. Her eyes brighter. Her movements more fluid. Changed. She dressed and left her chambers, drawn by an instinct she didn't fully understand. The manor no longer felt like a maze. She knew where Valerian was, could feel him in the eastern wing, in what she now understood to be his study. She found him at a desk covered in papers, writing in a language she recognized from the histories. Ancient Greek. He looked up when she entered, unsurprised. "You can sense me now," he said. "It's strange." Isolde moved into the room, drawn by curiosity rather than command. Like having a second heartbeat. The bond orients you toward your vampire. Valerian set down his pen. It's designed to keep consorts safe. You'll always know where I am. Always be able to find me if you're in danger. What if I want privacy? Learn to shield your emotions. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. It takes practice, but it's possible. I can teach you. Isolde sat, studying him. In the candlelight, he looked less monstrous than he had the previous night. More present, as if the bond had brought him into sharper focus. "What are you working on?" she asked. "Correspondence with the coven." He glanced at the papers, informing them that the bond has been properly established. They require proof. What kind of proof? They'll send an observer within the month, someone to verify that you bear the marks of the first blood. His jaw tightened. It's a formality, an intrusion. "I don't bear any marks," Isolde said. "You do." Valerian stood, circled the desk. "May I?" She nodded, uncertain. He touched her left wrist, where the ring sat, and turned her hand palm up. There, in silver script, just beneath the surface of her skin, were symbols she hadn't noticed before. Runes. Ancient and beautiful and permanent. "The blood writes itself," Valerian explained quietly. "These marks are the bond's signature. They prove you've completed the first blood." Isolde traced the symbols, felt power hum beneath her fingertips. What do they say? Bound to Valerian, Lord of Thornfield, by blood and covenant. He released her hand. "You are marked as mine now. Any vampire who sees those marks will know you're protected. The word protected hung heavy between them. Not owned, not claimed. Protected. What changed last night? Isolde asked. When you drank my blood, your eyes became what they are. Valerian turned away. I am always monster, Isolde. The bond simply allows you to see more clearly. That's not what I meant. She stood, frustrated. You looked at me like... She stopped, unable to articulate the recognition she'd felt, like you were precious. His voice was quiet. Because the blood bond reveals truth, Isolde. And the truth is that your blood... He stopped, shook his head. Forgive me. This is inappropriate. Tell me. He faced her, and his expression was raw in a way she'd never seen. Your blood is extraordinarily compatible with mine. The bond recognized you as... He stopped again, jaw clenched. As what? As perfect. The word came out rough. The coven law required a bride, but the bond chose you specifically. Your blood called to mine before you ever signed that contract. It's why the solicitor found you. Why the terms were so generous. Horror and wonder warred in Isolde's chest. You're saying this was fate? I'm saying the magic recognized you. Valerian's hands fisted. I chose you because you were desperate, but the bond had already chosen you long before I knew your name. Isolde sank back into the chair, mind reeling. That's impossible. Magic is never impossible, only inevitable. He returned to his desk, putting furniture between them like a barricade. But it changes nothing. You are still here against your will, still bound by a contract you didn't fully understand. But if the magic chose, magic does not care about consent. His voice turned sharp. It cares about compatibility, power, balance. The bond would happily consume you in the name of perfect union. It is my responsibility to ensure that doesn't happen. Isolde looked down at the marks on her wrist. Bound. Protected. Chosen. I don't know how to feel about this, she admitted. Neither do I. Valerian's gray eyes met hers across the desk. But we have time to figure it out, however long it takes. The observer, when they come, what will they expect to see? A functional bond. Evidence of mutual regard. He chose the word carefully. They will not expect love, not yet. But they will expect us to tolerate each other's presence without distress. That seems manageable. Does it? Something flickered in his expression, because every moment in your presence becomes more difficult, Isolde. The bond wants completion, full union, and resisting that pull requires considerable will. Are you saying you can't control yourself? I'm saying control becomes harder when your blood calls to mine like a siren song. He stood, abruptly. I should go, feed, before the hunger becomes problematic. Feed? The word made her stomach twist. You mean hunt? I mean visit the village. His voice was carefully neutral. Find a willing donor. Take what I need without killing. It's how I've survived for 3 centuries without becoming a monster. Isolde stood as well. Take me with you. Valerian stared at her. Absolutely not. Why? I'm your consort. Shouldn't I understand all aspects of what you are? You are my wife, not my accomplice. But something in his eyes shifted consideration, perhaps. Or hunger. I'm asking, Valerian, show me your world. He studied her for a long moment. Then, against what was surely better judgment, he offered his hand. Very well, he said. But stay close, and do exactly as I say. Isolde took his hand, and together they walked into the darkness. The village nestled in the valley below Thornfield like a scattering of stars. Isolde walked beside Valerian down the moonlit road, acutely aware of how her senses had sharpened. She could hear the village before seeing it: laughter, music, the murmur of evening conversations, smells carried on the wind, baking bread, wood smoke, flowers, and underneath it all, a scent she'd never noticed before. Warm, copper-sweet, blood. You smell it, Valerian said quietly. That's the bond. You don't hunger for it as I do, but you're aware. It's overwhelming. It will fade, become background noise. He guided her down a side street, away from the main square. The first few weeks are the most difficult. Every sense is heightened. They stopped outside a tavern. Warm light spilled from the windows, and inside, Isolde could see villagers gathered around tables. Normal people living normal lives. People who had no idea a vampire walked among them. "Do they know what you are?" she asked. Some suspect. Most rationalize. Valerian's expression was unreadable. Humans are remarkably good at ignoring what frightens them. "I am simply the Lord of Thornfield, reclusive, eccentric, harmless." "Are you harmless?" "No." He looked at her, and his eyes held centuries of truth. "I am a predator, Isolde. I have killed, in war, in hunger, in defense. The bond does not change that. It merely anchors me." Before she could respond, a young woman emerged from the tavern, red-haired, pretty, with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She saw Valerian and smiled. "My lord," she said, dipping a curtsy, "I wondered if you'd come tonight." "Margaret." Valerian inclined his head. "Forgive the intrusion. I've brought my wife." The woman's eyes widened, taking in Isolde. "Your wife. I'd heard rumors, but—" She curtsied again, deeper. "My lady, welcome." Isolde managed to nod, unsure what protocol demanded. Valerian gestured toward a narrow alley beside the tavern. "Shall we?" he asked Margaret. The woman followed without hesitation, and Isolde found herself trailing behind, heart pounding. This was wrong. Watching her husband feed from another woman felt like a violation, an intimacy she had no right to witness. But she'd asked for this. Asked to understand. In the alley shadows, Valerian turned to Margaret. "Are you well? Have you eaten today?" "Yes, my lord. Supper just an hour past." The woman tilted her head, exposing her throat with practiced ease. "I'm ready. The payment. Already in my cottage. You're generous as always." Margaret's smile was warm, genuine. "I don't mind, truly. It helps my mother with her medicine." So he paid them. Isolde felt something in her chest loosing relief, perhaps, that this was transaction rather than predation. Valerian looked at Isolde. "You can leave. You don't have to watch. I'm staying." His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Then he moved with inhuman speed, one hand cradling Margaret's head, the other at her waist. Gentle, protective. When his fangs sank into her throat, Margaret sighed, not in pain, but something closer to pleasure. Isolde watched, transfixed and horrified. Valerian fed with controlled precision, taking only what he needed. His throat worked with each swallow, and through the bond, Isolde felt his hunger ease, felt satisfaction like warm honey spreading through cold veins. And underneath it, guilt, shame, self-loathing. He hated this. Hated needing this. After less than a minute, Valerian withdrew. He licked the wound, closed a vampire's saliva apparently had healing properties, and steadied Margaret as she swayed. "Easy," he murmured. "Take a moment." "I'm well, my lord." Margaret touched her throat, found no blood. "Thank you, as always." He pressed coins into her hand far more than necessary, Isolde suspected. "Buy your mother something special. Tell her it's from Thornfield." Margaret curtsied and slipped back toward the tavern, leaving Isolde alone with Valerian in the shadowed alley. "Questions?" he asked, voice carefully neutral. "Does it always look like that? So intimate?" "Feeding is intimate." He wouldn't meet her eyes. The venom creates pleasure, prevents pain. It's a kindness and a manipulation. She seemed willing, because I pay well and ensure she suffers no lasting harm. Valerian finally looked at her. "But make no mistake, I am using her. Trading money for blood. It's predation, no matter how I dress it up." Isolde thought of the guilt she'd felt through the bond. "You hate yourself for it." "Shouldn't I?" His voice turned bitter. "I am damned, Isolde. Cursed to survive on the life force of others. 300 years hasn't made that easier to bear." Then why not drink from me? The words escaped before she'd fully thought them through. Valerian went very still. What did you say? You drank during the ritual. Why not? She stopped, face heating. I'm your wife. If feeding is necessary, wouldn't it be better to… No. The word was sharp as a blade. Absolutely not. Why? Because feeding from you would strengthen the bond exponentially. He moved closer, and there was something dangerous in his eyes. Because once I start, the bond will crave it constantly. Because drinking from my consort during intimacy creates a connection that borders on addiction. We're not intimate. Exactly. He stepped back, putting distance between them. And we won't be. I will not bind you more thoroughly through blood and desire. You deserve better than that. Isolde wrapped her arms around herself. What if I want to choose it? You don't know what you're asking. Valerian's voice was rough. The bond is already pulling us together. If we add blood feeding to the equation, it will become nearly impossible to maintain boundaries. You'll crave my bite. I'll crave your blood. It's a descent into dependency that serves no one. But it would be my choice. Would it? He faced her fully. Or would it be the bond manipulating your desires, making you want what the magic demands? He shook his head. I won't risk it, Isolde. Not with you. She wanted to argue. Wanted to insist she could make her own decisions, but exhaustion pulled at her. The late hour, the sensory overload, the weight of everything she'd witnessed. Take me home, she said quietly. Valerian offered his arm. As you wish. They walked back to Thornfield in silence, but through the bond, Isolde felt his turmoil, his hunger now sated, his desire carefully locked away. And underneath it all longing. For what, she wasn't certain, but she felt it echo in her own chest, unwanted and undeniable. The observer arrived on a night sick with fog. Isolde stood beside Valerian in the entrance hall, her heart pounding despite the bond's calming influence. The woman who swept through the doors was ancient, not in appearance, but in the weight she carried. Dark hair, elegant dress, eyes like polished obsidian. Lord Valerian. Her voice was silk over steel. Still clinging to your isolation, I see. Lady Saren. Valerian bowed with perfect formality. Welcome to Thornfield. The observer's gaze moved to Isolde, sharp and assessing. So this is the consort who has caused such interest among the coven. She circled Isolde slowly, predator evaluating prey. Show me your marks. Isolde extended her wrist where the silver runes gleamed beneath her skin. Lady Saren grasped her hand with cold fingers, studying the symbols with intensity that made Isolde's skin crawl. First blood completed, Saren murmured. Properly done. The bond is anchored. She released Isolde's hand. How long since the ritual? 3 weeks, Valerian said. And the connection? Stable? As stable as can be expected. Saren's eyes narrowed. That's not an answer, Valerian. Can you sense her? Always. And her emotional state right now? Apprehensive. Uncertain. Protective of her autonomy. Valerian's voice was steady. The bond functions as designed. Interesting. Saren turned to Isolde. And you, consort, can you feel him? Yes. Isolde's voice came out stronger than she felt. I know where he is, what he feels. The connection is present. Demonstrate, Saren gestured. Close your eyes, tell me where Valerian moves. Valerian shifted position without warning. Isolde kept her eyes closed and pointed. There, near the fireplace. He moved again. Again. She tracked him perfectly. Satisfactory. Saren settled into a chair as if the manor belonged to her. The bond is functional. However, I must observe the depth of connection. The coven requires certainty that this is not merely a legal fiction. What does that mean? Isolde asked. It means I will remain at Thornfield for 1 week. Saren's smile was cold. Observing. Testing. Ensuring the bond is genuine and not a clever manipulation to satisfy coven law while maintaining emotional distance. Valerian's jaw tightened. That won't be necessary. The coven disagrees. Saren produced a rolled parchment from her cloak. These are the assessment criteria. You will be evaluated on mutual awareness, emotional resonance, protective instinct, and physical compatibility. Physical compatibility? Isolde's voice cracked. Not what you fear, child. Saren's expression softened marginally. The bond creates physical synchronization, matched breathing, heartbeat synchronization, when in close proximity, instinctive protective positioning. We need to verify these manifestations. And if we fail the assessment, Valerian asked, then the bond is declared insufficient and you both face execution. Saren delivered the sentence with casual brutality. The coven does not tolerate deception. Horror washed through Isolde, so sharp that Valerian's head snapped toward her. Through the bond, she felt his fury cold and controlled but absolute. You would execute her for my failure? His voice was soft, dangerous. The bond makes you one entity under coven law. Saren met his gaze without flinching. If the covenant is fraudulent, both parties are complicit. She signed in ignorance. Ignorance is not exemption. Saren stood. You have 1 week, Valerian. Convince me this bond is real or face the consequences. She swept from the hall, leaving them in suffocating silence. Isolde sat in her chambers, hands trembling. 1 week. 7 days to prove that a bond forged in desperation and manipulation was somehow genuine. How could they possibly? A knock at her door. Valerian's presence felt before he spoke. May I enter? His voice was strained. Yes. He came in, closed the door behind him. For a long moment, he simply stood there, struggle visible on his face. I'm sorry, he finally said. I should have anticipated this. Should have warned you that verification would be invasive. Will we pass? Isolde asked bluntly. I don't know. He moved to the window, stared out at the fog-shrouded grounds. The bond is real enough. But Saren will be looking for depth, for intimacy we haven't cultivated. Then we cultivate it. Isolde stood, determination overriding fear. What did they expect to see? Synchronization. Shared space without discomfort, protective instinct. He turned to face her. And emotional resonance. The bond should make us attuned to each other's needs. We can manage that, can we? Valerian's expression was bleak. You flinch when I come too close. I maintain distance to respect your boundaries. Saren will interpret that as failure. Then we stop maintaining distance. Isolde crossed to him, heart pounding. For 1 week, we act like we're actually married. Isolde, we don't have a choice. She looked up at him, this beautiful monster who held her life in his cold hands. Unless you prefer execution, I'd prefer you lived. His voice was rough, even if that means my destruction. That's not how this works. She reached out, took his hand cold and perfect and deadly. We're bound, Valerian. Your death is mine, so we survive together or not at all. His fingers tightened around hers. This will require closeness, shared meals, sleeping in the same room, acting as if we, he stopped, as if we care for each other, Isolde finished. Then we do exactly that. Through the bond, she felt his conflict, his desire to protect her warring with the reality that survival required surrender. Required them to stop fighting what the magic demanded and lean into the connection they'd both been resisting. All right, he said finally. For 1 week, we'll give Saren what she wants. A real marriage. Or a convincing performance of one. His gray eyes held hers. I just hope we can remember which is which when it's over. Isolde hoped the same thing, but deep in her chest, where the bond pulsed with warmth that wasn't entirely her own, she suspected the line between performance and reality had already begun to blur. Day 1 began with breakfast. Saren insisted on observing them at their most mundane, so Isolde found herself sitting across from Valerian at a table laden with food she'd eat and tea he wouldn't drink. The observer sat at the head of the table watching them with those ancient, knowing eyes. Your routines, Saren said. Walk me through them. Valerian set down his untouched teacup. I wake at dusk, attend to estate business, feed when necessary, paint to pass the hours. And you, consort? I wake at dawn, Isolde stopped, reconsidered. I used to wake at dawn, now it's closer to dusk. I read, walk the gardens, avoid the west wing as instructed. Seren's eyebrow arched. You've forbidden her the west wing. It's dangerous, Valerian said flatly. Or you're hiding something. Seren leaned back. Take her there, now. I want to see how she handles your darkness. Valerian's hands clenched on the table. That's unnecessary. That's required. Seren's voice brooked no argument. Show your wife what you are, all of what you are. The west wing smelled of earth and old blood. Valerian led Isolde through corridors she'd been forbidden, past locked doors and drawn curtains, down into depths of Thornfield that felt more tomb than home. Seren followed at a distance, a silent observer of their descent. What's down here? Isolde asked, though she could feel Valerian's dread through the bond. My past. He stopped before a heavy iron door. The parts I wanted you never to see. Show me anyway. He unlocked the door. The chamber beyond was a workshop of sorts, but instead of paintings or sculptures it held weapons, swords, stakes, silver chains, vampire hunting tools, all meticulously maintained. I was turned against my will, Valerian said quietly, not looking at her. For the first 100 years I hunted my own kind, tried to purge the monster from the world. These are the tools I used. Isolde moved through the space, taking in the evidence of his self-hatred. How many did you kill? Dozens. Perhaps more. His voice was hollow. I told myself I was doing good, protecting humans. But I was really just punishing myself for what I'd become. She turned to face him. When did you stop? When I realized I was becoming worse than the monsters I hunted. He gestured to a corner where chains lay coiled. I chained myself during blood moons, starved myself to test my control. I was hunting the monster within, and it was destroying me. Eleanor stopped you, Isolde guessed. Eleanor loved the monster. His expression twisted with old grief. She saw past the curse to the man I'd been. Convinced me I could choose who I became, rather than being defined by what I was. Seren spoke from the doorway. And yet you hide this from your new wife. Why? Because she deserves better than this legacy of violence? Or because you're afraid she'll see you clearly and choose to leave? Seren's voice was sharp. The bond requires honesty, Valerian, not protection. Isolde approached Valerian slowly, her heart aching for the centuries of pain he carried. I'm not going to run. You should. He finally met her eyes. I am broken, Isolde, damaged by time and grief and self-hatred. The bond makes me seem romantic, tragic, but the truth is far uglier. Then show me ugly. She took his cold hand. Show me truth. We have 6 days left. Let's use them to actually know each other. Through the bond, she felt his resistance crumble. Days 2 through 4 were excavation. Valerian showed her everything. The portraits of Eleanor painted from memory after she'd been destroyed. The journals where he'd documented 3 centuries of loneliness. The locked room where he kept her ashes, preserved in a silver urn. I should have let her go, he said, standing in that shrine to lost love. But she was all I had, all I loved. For 200 years, I've been unable to move forward. Isolde understood grief. Had watched her father waste away, seen her mother slowly follow. Love doesn't end with death. No. He turned to her. But it should make room for new growth. I've been a tomb, Isolde, locked in the past, unable to feel. You feel now. She could sense it through the bond, his confusion, his reluctant attachment, his fear of losing someone again. Too much. His voice was raw. The bond makes me vulnerable, makes me care when caring is dangerous. Seren, ever present, spoke from the doorway. That's the point, Valerian. The bond forces growth. Day 5 brought the physical tests. Seren had them sit together in silence, measuring the synchronization of their breathing. Isolde's heartbeat, initially racing, gradually slowed to match some invisible rhythm that connected her to Valerian's undead existence. "Remarkable," Saren murmured, making notes. "Full physiological attunement." She had them walk the gardens at night. When Isolde stumbled on uneven ground, Valerian caught her before she'd fully registered falling instinct faster than thought. "Protective reflex," Saren recorded. "Instantaneous." She tested emotional resonance by having Valerian leave the room while she questioned Isolde about the bond. "Every lie Isolde told, I feel nothing for him. This is purely obligation," made Valerian flinch in the corridor outside, her deception physically painful through the connection. When he returned, his expression was carefully blank. But Isolde felt his hurt like a knife. "I'm sorry," she whispered that night, standing in his study. "I thought I was protecting us. You were lying." His voice was quiet, and it hurt, which tells me the bond is deeper than I realized. "Does that frighten you?" "Terrifies me." He looked up from his desk. "Because in 6 days, Saren will leave, and we'll have to decide if we continue this closeness or return to our careful distance." Isolde moved closer, drawn by something she didn't want to name. "What if I don't want distance anymore? Isolde." Her name was a warning. "What if the bond isn't manipulation?" She knelt beside his chair. "What if it simply revealed what was already possible? You're conflating forced intimacy with genuine feeling." "Am I?" She met his eyes. "Or are you so afraid of loss that you can't recognize connection when it's offered?" Valerian's hand rose, cupped her face with devastating gentleness. His thumb brushed her cheek, and Isolde's breath caught. 2 more days, he said softly. "Let's survive the assessment. Then we can discuss what this is. Promise? I promise. I promise." But they both knew that in 2 days everything would change. Day 7 arrived with rain. Isolde woke in Valerian's bed. They'd been sharing chambers for Saren's inspection, and found him already awake, staring at the ceiling. Through the bond, his anxiety was a living thing. "Today," she said, "today." He didn't look at her. "Saren will deliver her judgment." They'd done everything required. Demonstrated synchronization, protective instinct, emotional attunement, shared space without flinching, touched without recoil, learned each other's rhythms until they moved together like a choreographed dance. It should be enough, but Isolde felt Valerian's doubt like acid in her veins. Saren summoned them to the great hall at sunset. She stood before the fireplace, regal and ancient, holding a scroll marked with the Coven's seal. "I have completed my assessment," she announced. "The bond is genuine. The physiological markers are present. The emotional resonance is clear." Relief flooded through Isolde. They'd passed. They would live. "However," Saren continued, "an ice replaced the relief. There is a problem." Valerian went very still. "What problem?" "The bond is genuine but incomplete." Saren's dark eyes moved between them. "You have established connection, but you're resisting the final stage, the full covenant." "We completed the first blood," Isolde protested, "which is merely the beginning." Saren approached them. "The bond has 3 stages. First blood, which anchors. Second blood, which deepens. And final blood, which completes. You have anchored yourselves to each other while refusing to deepen the connection." "That was intentional," Valerian said. "The consort did not agree to full bonding. And yet the magic demands it." Saren's voice was cold. "An incomplete bond is unstable. It will eventually collapse, killing you both. The Coven cannot endorse a covenant that contains the seeds of its own destruction." "How long?" Isolde's voice shook. "How long do we have?" "Months, perhaps a year." Saren's expression held something like pity. "The bond is strengthening naturally, but without the second blood to guide that growth, it will become toxic, consuming rather than sustaining." Valerian's hands clenched. "Then what do you recommend?" "Complete the bond. Properly." Saren held up a hand before he could protest. "I'm not demanding you do it today, but the Coven requires commitment, a date, an intention to move forward rather than remain in this liminal space." "And if we refuse?" Valerian asked. Then I report that the bond is unstable and the coven orders immediate execution before the deterioration becomes dangerous to others. Silence fell, heavy as a shroud. Isolde felt Valerian's resignation through the bond, felt his willingness to accept execution rather than force her into full bonding. It should have comforted her. Instead, it ignited something fierce in her chest. "No," she said. Both Seren and Valerian looked at her. "No?" Seren repeated. "I won't let him die for my sake." Isolde turned to Valerian. "And I won't die for his misguided nobility. If the bond requires completion, then we complete it." "Isolde," Valerian's voice was strained. "You don't understand what you're agreeing to. Then explain it to me." She faced him fully. "Right now, with Seren as witness, tell me what the second blood actually means." Valerian looked like she'd stabbed him. But Seren nodded approvingly. "Yes, Valerian, tell your wife what she's choosing." He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them, meeting Isolde's gaze with painful honesty. "The second blood is exchanged during intimacy, physical and emotional union while sharing blood. It creates a bond so deep that you'll feel not just my emotions but my thoughts, my memories, my hunger. Will it turn me? No, but it will change you further, make you nearly immortal while the bond persists. You'll age slower, heal faster, gain strength beyond mortal limits." His voice dropped. "And you'll be addicted to my bite, to the connection. It's why I've resisted, because once we cross that threshold, there's no going back to what we were." "And the alternative is death." "Yes." Isolde turned to Seren. "How long do we have to decide? The coven requires an answer before I leave tomorrow evening." Seren's expression was unreadable. "Choose soon, consort. Your time is running out." She left them alone in the great hall. Valerian retreated to his study. Isolde followed, unwilling to give him the solitude he craved. "We have to do this," she said. "No." He didn't turn from the window. "I won't manipulate you into deeper bondage. It's not manipulation if I'm choosing freely. Is it free choice when the alternative is death?" He finally faced her. "You're choosing survival, Isolde, not me. Can't it be both?" He laughed bitterly. "You don't even like me." "I didn't." She moved closer. "Past tense, but 7 days of actually knowing you has changed things. The bond changed things, created false intimacy. Was it false when you showed me Eleanor's ashes?" Isolde challenged. "When you let me see your self-hatred, when you caught me before I could fall, not because the bond demanded it, but because you cared?" Valerian's jaw clenched. "Caring isn't love." "No, but it's a foundation." She stood before him now, close enough to feel the cold radiating from his skin. "I don't love you, Valerian. Not yet, but I could. Given time, given the chance to know you without the threat of execution hanging over us. And if the bond manufactures that love, makes you think you chose it when really the magic decided for you, then I'll spend eternity unable to tell the difference." She reached up, cupped his face the way he'd cupped hers days before. "But I'd rather live uncertain than die, knowing we could have had something real." His hand covered hers, cold and trembling. "I don't want to lose you." "Then keep me." Her voice was soft. "Complete the bond. Give us a chance to become what the magic already thinks we are." Isolde. Her name was a prayer and a surrender. "Tomorrow," she said, "we tell Seren yes, and then we figure out the rest together." Valerian pulled her close, his embrace careful despite his obvious need. Isolde pressed her face to his chest and felt no heartbeat, only the stillness of the undead and the warmth of the bond pulsing between them. "I'll try," he whispered into her hair, "to be worthy of this, of you." "Just be honest," Isolde replied. "That's all I need." Outside, rain battered the windows. Inside, two souls bound by desperation began to choose each other freely. The night of the second blood, Thornfield Hall held its breath. Seren had departed that afternoon, satisfied with their commitment. The coven would receive notice that the bond would be completed within the week. Valerian and Isolde were granted time to prepare, though. What preparation sufficed for eternal union, neither could say. Isolde stood in her chambers. Their chambers, now dressed in a gown the color of midnight. Valerian had sent it to her with a note, for choosing me. She understood now what she was about to do. The second blood wasn't merely physical intimacy. It was the complete dissolution of boundaries between souls. After tonight, Valerian would feel her thoughts as clearly as she felt his emotions. There would be no hiding. No pretense. Only truth. The door opened. Valerian entered, and Isolde's breath caught. He was beautiful in his formal coat, hair tied back, expression vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "You can still refuse," he said quietly. "Even now, I'll find another way." Convince the coven. "Stop." Isolde crossed to him. "I'm not refusing. You should be afraid." "I am afraid." She took his hands. "But fear doesn't mean no." He studied her face, searching for doubt. Finding only determination, he nodded slowly. "Then we do this properly." He led her to the bed, where candles burned in careful arrangement. "The ritual requires intent. Consent spoken aloud. Are you certain, Isolde?" "Yes." Her voice was steady. "Even knowing what you'll become, what you'll feel?" "Especially knowing that." She sat on the edge of the bed. "I've spent 7 days learning you, Valerian. Your grief, your guilt, your careful control. I'm not entering this blind." "No." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You're entering it with eyes wide open. That might be more terrifying. For both of us." Isolde reached up, traced the line of his jaw. "You'll feel my thoughts too, my doubts, my resentment of how this began." "I know." He caught her hand, pressed it to his cold cheek. "And I'll bear it. Whatever you feel, I'll accept it as truth. Then let's stop talking." She pulled him down beside her. "And complete what we started." The second blood began with words. "I offer this freely," Isolde said, the ritual phrase Valerian had taught her. "Blood and body and soul. For the deepening of our covenant." "I accept freely," Valerian responded. "And offer the same. Blood and body and soul. For the completion of our bond." The candles flared, responding to magic older than civilizations. Valerian's fingers trembled as he unlaced her gown. Each movement was reverent, careful, giving her endless opportunities to stop him. But Isolde didn't stop, didn't hesitate. She helped him undress, revealed herself without shame, and guided his cold hands to warmer skin. "I need your permission," he whispered against her throat. "For everything. Tell me if it's too much." "I will." She tilted her head, exposing her throat. "Take what you need." His fangs descended. The bite, when it came, was pure pleasure, the venom transmuting pain into ecstasy. Isolde gasped, hands fisting in his hair as Valerian drank, and through the bond, she felt his hunger not just for blood, but for connection, for an end to centuries of isolation. "Now you," he said, pulling back. His wrist was already bleeding from where he'd bitten himself. "Drink." She pressed her mouth to the wound and tasted darkness. Power. Eternity. The blood burned down her throat, and suddenly she wasn't just Isolde anymore. She was Valerian too. She felt his memories cascade through her mind, 300 years of existence compressed into heartbeats. She felt his turning, Eleanor's love, the hunter's attack, felt 200 years of grief and isolation, felt the moment he'd first seen Isolde's name on the contract and known, with sick certainty, that he was condemning another innocent, and beneath it all hope. Fragile and new, but present. Hope that maybe, impossibly, this forced bond could become something real. The physical intimacy that followed was transcendent. Their bodies moved together with the synchronization of long practice. Though this was their first union, the bond guided them, showed them how to pleasure each other, how to merge not just physically but spiritually. When Valerian bit her again, when she bit him in return, the world exploded into sensation. She felt his pleasure, and her own simultaneously, felt the bond complete itself with the snap-like reality reshaping. And then, silence. Perfect, profound silence. Not absence, but unity. She could feel Valerian's thoughts like they were her own, could sense his wonder, his awe, his terror at being known so completely. I see you. His thought brushed against hers. All of you. And you're extraordinary. I see you too, she thought back, and you're not the monster you believe. They lay tangled together afterward, hearts beating in perfect synchronization, hers warm and mortal, his sustained by magic and will. How do you feel? Valerian asked aloud, though he could sense her emotions now without asking. Different. Isolde traced patterns on his chest. Stronger. More, but still myself. The bond doesn't erase identity, it enhances. His hand stroked her hair. You'll age slower now, heal faster. As long as I exist, you'll be sustained. And when you don't exist, then you'll have days, maybe weeks, before the bond severing kills you. He said it matter-of-factly. We're truly tied now, Isolde. My death is yours, and yours is mine. She propped herself up on one elbow. So we'd better take care of each other. Through the bond, she felt his love new and tentative and growing, felt him recognize it, accept it, surrender to it. I didn't think I could feel this again, he admitted, after Eleanor. After 2 centuries of numbness. The bond didn't create this, Isolde said softly. It just gave us the foundation to build it. Do you love me? The question was vulnerable, raw. Isolde considered. Sent her honest answer through the bond so he could feel its truth. Not yet, but I'm choosing to, every day. Until eventually, I won't be able to remember when I didn't. Valerian pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. That's enough, more than enough. We have time now, Isolde murmured. All the time we need. Eternity, Valerian agreed. Or something close to it. Outside, dawn approached. For the first time in 300 years, Valerian didn't dread the coming day. Because Isolde would be there when he woke at dusk, would be there for all the dusks and midnights and endless nights ahead. They'd begun in contract and desperation. They'd found something real in the spaces between, and now, bound by blood and choice and magic as old as darkness itself, they would write their own story. One night at a time. Forever. The END.